I always thought the worst betrayal was the one that came from the outside, from strangers, from people you expected nothing from. But it's not. The worst betrayal is the one that comes from inside your home, from someone you opened your doors to, from someone you welcomed with open arms thinking you were gaining a daughter. My name is Isabel. I'm 68 years old, and throughout my entire life I worked hard on this property I inherited from my parents. Here I raised my son alone after my husband left us. Here I planted every tree, fixed every fence, took care of every corner with my own 2 hands. And my chickens, my chickens were more than just animals to me. They were my company, my livelihood, my joy of waking up early and seeing the yard full of life. I had 27 chickens, each one with their own personality, each one I knew by name. They were the ones who gave me the eggs I sold at the farmer's market every Saturday. They were the ones who paid my electric bills, who bought my blood pressure medication, who gave me independence so I didn't have to ask anyone for anything. When my son Ethan brought Karen home for the first time, I confess I didn't feel completely comfortable. Not because she was a bad person, it wasn't that. But she had that big city way about her, all perfumed, with manicured nails, talking about things I didn't really understand. She looked at my house, at my wood-burning stove, at my dirt yard as if all of it was too miserable. Even so, I tried. God knows how hard I tried to welcome that girl into my home. Ethan seemed so happy beside her that I swallowed any concerns and embraced that girl as if she were my own daughter. After they got married, Karen started coming around more often. At first I actually enjoyed the company, having another woman around, someone to talk to while I took care of my things. But over time, I started noticing little things that bothered me. She'd mess with my pots without asking, move things around, make comments about how I should modernize the house, sell some pieces of land, make better use of the space. I listened in silence because I didn't want to create problems, didn't want my son to have to choose between me and his wife. But inside it was hurting me, making me feel like I was no longer in charge of my own life, my own home. It was on a Tuesday in March when everything fell apart. I had gone to town to take care of some things at the bank, took longer than expected because the line was huge and the heat unbearable. When I got back home, it was already past 4 in the afternoon and the sun was starting to set. I parked the car in front of the house and the first thing that struck me as strange was the silence. That silence that wasn't normal. Where was the sound of the chickens? Where was that wonderful commotion that always greeted me when I arrived? I got out of the car worried, feeling that something was very wrong. I walked to the chicken coop with my heart racing, and when I opened the gate, I was met with the most painful emptiness I've ever felt in my life. There wasn't a single chicken, not even a feather on the ground. The feeder empty, the waterer dry, and that space that had always been so full of movement now looked like an abandoned cemetery. I felt my legs weaken and had to hold onto the fence to keep from falling. I took a deep breath trying to understand what had happened, thinking of all the possibilities. A thief? But how if the gate was locked from the inside? That's when I heard laughter coming from inside the house. Karen's laugh, loud and carefree, mixed with my son's voice. I came in through the kitchen door, and the two of them were sitting at the table, having coffee and eating cake as if nothing had happened. Karen saw me and smiled in that way of hers, all excited. She said she had wonderful news to tell me, that she had managed to organize everything just right, and that I was going to love the surprise. I was still in shock, trying to process the empty chicken coop, so I could only ask where my chickens were. Her smile faltered a little, but soon came back even wider. She explained, with all the naturalness in the world, that she had sold all the chickens to the butcher in town. She said she had gotten a good price, almost $3,000 total, and that she had used that money to pay for her birthday party, which would be next Saturday. She continued talking excitedly about how she had rented a beautiful hall, hired catering, a DJ, complete decorations, and that it would be the most beautiful party I had ever seen. I stood there, standing in the middle of my kitchen, trying to understand if I had heard correctly. Karen kept talking about the guest list, about the dress she had bought, about how everything would be perfect. My son was quiet, scrolling on his phone, avoiding looking at me. I asked again, my voice coming out weak, trembling, if she had really sold my chickens without asking me. She stopped talking and looked at me with that offended expression of someone who doesn't understand what the problem is. She said they were just chickens, that I could buy more later, that her party was important and she needed the money. She said she had thought about borrowing it, but decided it would be better this way, more practical, without having to owe anyone. She even had the nerve to say that I should be happy because she had gotten a better price than I would have gotten at the market. I felt anger rising in my chest, an anger I had never felt in my life. It wasn't just about the chickens, although they meant so much to me. It was about the invasion, the disrespect, the absolute lack of consideration. She had come onto my property, had messed with what was mine, had sold what gave me my livelihood, and still expected me to be happy about it. I looked at my son expecting him to say something, to take some action, to defend his mother. But Ethan remained silent, his eyes fixed on his phone, pretending he wasn't seeing my pain. It was at that moment I decided this wouldn't stand. I spent my whole life accepting disrespect, swallowing humiliation, bowing down to please others. I raised my son alone, working from sunrise to sunset, never denied him anything, sacrificed myself so he could study and have a better life than mine. And now I was there, in my own house, being disrespected in the worst possible way, and he didn't even have the courage to open his mouth. So I told Karen to gather her things and get off my property. She gave a nervous laugh, thinking I was joking. She looked at Ethan, expecting him to intervene, to say I was overreacting. But I remained serious, repeating that she was no longer welcome there, that she had crossed every boundary, that I would never again accept receiving someone who had so little respect for me. Karen started screaming, saying I was being ridiculous, that they were just chickens, that she was my daughter-in-law and deserved more consideration. She said she had done it thinking I wouldn't mind, that I should be grateful she had included me in the party, that a woman my age needed to learn to be more flexible and less attached to animals. Every word that came out of her mouth showed me how naive I had been, how much I had let that woman invade my life thinking she had good intentions. I looked at my son and asked if he had anything to say. Ethan finally put down his phone and looked at me with that face of someone being forced to make a difficult decision. Karen grabbed onto his arm, saying I was going crazy, that it was absurd to kick her out over chickens, that he needed to do something. I waited. I waited for my son, who I carried in my womb, who I nursed, who I raised with all the love in the world, to defend me for the first time in his life. And to my surprise, to Karen's own surprise, he pulled away from her arm and said that she was the one going crazy. He said that those chickens were important to me, that she knew that she had no right to sell what wasn't hers without asking. Karen was stunned, her eyes wide, her mouth open, unable to speak. She expected him to take her side, to convince me to change my mind, to put his wife above his mother, as she had probably imagined would happen. But Ethan repeated what I had said. He asked her to gather her things and leave. He said she had crossed the line, that she needed to learn to respect people, and that he wasn't going to condone what she had done. Karen started crying, that dramatic crying of someone who isn't used to hearing no. She begged Ethan to reconsider, said she would apologize to me, that she'd return the money, that she'd cancel the party. But I had already decided. It wasn't about the money. It never was. It was about respect, about knowing that inside my own house I still had a voice. I maintained my decision and repeated that she had 1 hour to leave. Karen looked at me with a hatred I'll never forget, grabbed her purse and left, slamming the door so hard the whole house shook. The days that followed were difficult. Ethan stayed with me for a few days, helping to fix some things on the property, talking about what had happened. He apologized to me for not noticing sooner how much Karen was disrespecting me, for not paying attention to the small signs I was trying to show. He said he had been blind, that he was so wrapped up in the marriage that he didn't see the reality right in front of him. I was proud of him for taking my side, but also sad that it had to come to that point for him to see the truth. I bought new chickens, 10 for now, because that's what my money allowed, and I slowly rebuilt what had been destroyed. The chicken coop came back to life, came back to sound, and I went back to waking up early with that good feeling of having purpose and company. Ethan and Karen separated 3 months later. He told me that after that day, things were never the same between them, that he started noticing other behaviors of hers that showed selfishness and lack of empathy. He said the chicken episode was just the last straw of a relationship that hadn't been healthy for a while. I was sad to see my son suffer through the end of his marriage, but relieved to know he had learned to see what really matters in a person. A few weeks ago, Karen showed up here at the property. I was in the yard taking care of my chickens when I saw her standing at the gate with red and swollen eyes. She asked to talk to me, and I, after much thought, let her in. We sat on the porch and Karen started crying. She apologized in a way that seemed sincere, said she had been selfish, immature, and cruel. She said she had lost everything because of her own arrogance, that the marriage had ended, that she had lost friends, that her family was disappointed with her actions. She said she thought about that episode every day, that she deeply regretted doing what she did, that she wished she could go back in time and act differently. I listened to everything in silence, watching that woman who had been so confident and was now destroyed by guilt. I didn't feel anger, I didn't feel revenge, I didn't feel satisfaction in seeing her like that. I just felt a deep sadness for everything that had happened, for how things could have been different if she had simply respected me from the beginning. I told her that I accepted the apology, but that some things you can't fix just with words. I explained that she had broken a trust that would take a long time to rebuild, if it ever would be. Karen nodded, wiped away her tears, and thanked me for listening to her. Before leaving, she looked at the chicken coop and commented on how beautiful it was, how happy the chickens looked scratching in the yard. Today, when I look back, I understand that that episode taught me something important. It taught me that respect isn't something you ask for, it's something you demand. It taught me that love without boundaries isn't love, it's permission to be trampled on. And it taught me that it's never too late to defend what is ours, what we built with sweat and sacrifice. My chickens are here with me. My son learned a valuable lesson. And I, at 68 years old, learned that I still have enough strength not to let anyone diminish the value of my life.